Cigarettes weren't just a habit, they were a backdrop, like wallpaper in American life. You could spot them in hands, in movies, in waiting rooms, even in church socials. They promised calm, confidence, and grown-up poise, all in a thin paper tube. But what happens when a product becomes normal before anyone asks what it costs? How did smoke become a symbol of freedom, sophistication, even health, all at once? And who benefited when doubt was sold as reassurance, night after night, year after year? This story isn't only about nicotine. It's about attention, messaging, and silent bargains. Because the lie wasn't hidden in a back room, it sat on every countertop. If everyone is doing it, how could it be dangerous? People asked, almost reflexively. Tonight we trace how normal was built, defended, and finally cracked in public. Picture post-war America, where prosperity gleamed and new rituals filled new living rooms. In diners and offices, ashtrays appeared as naturally as menus and staplers, everywhere you looked. Cigarette brands competed like car makers, selling identity, status, and belonging more than tobacco itself. One brand offered rugged masculinity, another offered elegance, another offered modern science and reassurance. Radio jingles, magazine spreads, and billboards made smoke feel like good company everywhere. Hollywood helped too, framing cigarettes as punctuation for romance, stress, triumph, and heartbreak. On screen, a lit match could signal confidence, mystery, or a private invitation. At home, smoke drifted through family photos, birthdays, card games, and holiday drives. Doctors were respected, and advertisers knew the power of a white coat on camera. So ads featured physicians, surveys, and soothing phrases that sounded like clinical proof. The industry learned early that being questioned was dangerous, even before evidence was settled. They watched medical journals, funded friendly studies, and kept critics off balance intentionally. Meanwhile, soldiers had received cigarettes and rations, tying smoking to service and belonging. After the war, that connection followed men home, into factories, offices, and suburbs. Women too were targeted, with campaigns linking cigarettes to slimness, independence, and charm. The product wasn't sold as poison, it was sold as a small reward. And once a reward becomes routine, it starts to feel like a right. By the 1950s, smoke was so common it could disappear in plain sight. The stage was set, a profitable habit, a proud culture, and warnings just beginning. Behind the cheerful ads, researchers were noticing troubling patterns in lungs and hearts. Early studies linked heavy smoking to cancer, a correlation felt easier to dismiss. The industry response was swift, polished, and carefully worded to maximize comfort for readers. They didn't need to prove safety. They needed only to delay certainty publicly. Public statements emphasized controversy, more research, and no final answers, again and again. Companies formed research committees that sounded independent, even when their funding controlled conclusions. Press releases promised responsibility, while internal memos tracked profits, politics, and public moods carefully. Filters were marketed as progress, suggesting technology could tame risk without quitting altogether. Low tar and mild labels implied a safer choice, like switching to lighter coffee. But design changes often encouraged deeper inhalation, keeping nicotine delivery steady for the body. Advertising moved into every corner: sports, fashion, news, daytime television, and holiday specials. Cigarettes sponsored shows, concerts, and broadcasts, blending entertainment with consumption until lines blurred. If your favorite program arrived with a logo, the product felt like a patron. merchants placed packs by cash registers, making purchase a quick, unthinking gesture for adults. Machines sold cigarettes like candy, shiny and mechanical, promising adult convenience with every coin. In offices, smoke breaks became social currency, a moment to join the group. Refusing could seem rude, anxious, or unmanly, depending on the room and company. Schools warned children about manners, not addiction, when smoke lingered indoors after meetings. Airplanes served meals through a haze as if their red pellet was too broad. They were all white, black, and white. Restaurants separated smokers and non-smokers with a sign, not a wall or ventilation. At home, ashtrays sat beside the phone, the TV, and the family photo frames. A cigarette after dinner became a closing ritual, like a curtain dropping on the day. For many, the first drag was learned from a parent, a boss, or a star. The industry understood imitation, and it cultivated it with relentless repetition, style, and polish. When health concerns rose, they offered reassurance, packaged as choice and personal control. They framed smoking as a matter of taste, not chemistry, addiction, and compulsion working together. By shifting blame to individuals, they protected the product from collective judgment and regulation. By the time risk sounded serious, millions were already dependent, and quitting felt impossible. Consequences arrived quietly, because illness rarely looks dramatic at the beginning of addiction. A cough became smoker's cough, a joke that softened fear into normalcy for years. Shortness of breath was blamed on age, stress, or being out of shape. Doctors saw patterns, but patients saw isolated problems, scattered across years of work and stress. Families adjusted, opening windows, washing curtains, and accepting yellowed walls as ordinary wear. Children sat in back seats with cracked windows, breathing what adults considered harmless. Workplaces treated smoke as atmosphere, not exposure, and complaints as personal weakness or fussiness. Insurance tables shifted, hospital wards filled, and funerals started coming earlier than expected. Yet the product kept its social shine, because addiction can wear a friendly face. For low-income communities, cigarettes were both escape and expense, a costly comfort. For many women, smoking became tied to managing appetite, nerves, and social pressure. For teenagers, it became a test of adulthood, purchased with borrowed confidence and secrecy. The industry watched those beginnings closely, because new smokers replaced the sick and dead. As evidence strengthened, warnings grew harder to ignore, and language began to change. Habits started to sound like dependence, and choice started to sound like hook. Secondhand smoke reframed the debate because it showed the costs weren't truly private. A cigarette wasn't only what you inhaled, it was what everyone else endured. Suddenly, smoke in public spaces looked less like charm and more like trespass. Families argued about living rooms, cars, and hospital visits, not just ashtrays and odors. Some smokers felt betrayed, realizing safer labels had been more marketing than protection. Others resisted because quitting meant confronting stress without the old script or social refuge. Even as deaths rose, the industry fought regulation with lawyers, lobbyists, and friendly experts. They donated, sponsored, and negotiated, treating policy as another marketplace to influence and manage. Economies depended on tobacco jobs and taxes, giving politicians reasons to hesitate publicly. Newsrooms, once filled with smoke, faced conflicts when cigarette advertisers paid the bills. Sports, music, and nightlife carried cigarette branding, shaping culture's visual language for decades. Smoking became shorthand for cool, rebellion, or sophistication, depending on the decade and scene. At the same time, health advocates built new institutions and pushed for public warnings. The 1964 Surgeon General's report marked a turning point, naming smoking a serious hazard. Television cigarette ads were later banned, but the images remained in memory, and reruns. Warning labels appeared, small at first, like a whisper on a loud package. Airline and workplace rules tightened slowly, changing what was acceptable in shared air. By the 1980s and 1990s, lawsuits exposed internal documents and sharpened public anger. Settlements funded prevention campaigns, and the social meaning of smoking began to invert. The cigarette shifted from glamorous accessory to contested behavior, watched, restricted, and increasingly taxed. Still, the story was never simple. Many smokers were trying, struggling, and coping. They weren't villains, they were customers, trained by culture, stress, and chemistry together over time. The lie you could see everywhere worked because it offered belonging, not just nicotine. It turned uncertainty into comfort, and comfort into routine, until routine felt unquestionable. When the spell finally broke, it broke unevenly, leaving some behind in the haze. We should remember how a familiar image can feel safer than hard evidence. Normal can be manufactured, repeated, and defended until it seems like the only option. When you look at old photos, do you notice the smoke like a watermark across decades? Notice how quickly a shared habit becomes a shared excuse, repeated without thinking. Notice how advertising borrows authority, then disappears when the bill comes due for families. Notice how industries rarely need your love. They need your routine, daily and automatic. Public health didn't defeat cigarettes with one speech. It changed the room over time. It moved ashtrays away, rewrote rules, and replaced glamour with plain facts and warnings. Yet the strongest shift came when people pictured harm not as rumor, but as pattern. When patterns became personal, everywhere started to feel like too much, all at once. Today, many spaces are clear, and younger generations recognize smoke as outdated and intrusive. Memory is powerful, and nostalgia can soften dangerous history into a comforting haze. The lesson isn't to shame the past, it's to study how permission is granted. Because every era has its comforts, and every comfort asks for something back. In the end, cigarettes were normal because normal was engineered, curated, and protected. And once you see that, you start noticing the scaffolding behind other everyday choices. The smell on jackets, the ash in cars, the stained fingers were quiet receipts. Some quit with sheer will, others with patches, gum, support groups, and time. Others never quit, and their families carried stories that ads never pictured fully. Public spaces changed first, then private spaces, as expectations shifted one conversation at a time. A no smoking sign became a new kind of etiquette, replacing the offered light. The same media that normalized smoke eventually highlighted quitting, breath, and healthier futures. Tobacco farms and factories adapted unevenly, as markets tightened and alternatives slowly appeared. Yet companies kept searching for new images, new customers, and new loopholes in language. That is why the past matters, because persuasion rarely disappears, it only changes costumes. When you remember the ashtrays, you also remember how easily danger can look familiar. Normal is a story we repeat together until evidence forces us to rewrite it. And that rewrite, though painful, is how a society learns to breathe again.